Hello everybody, and this is the second part of the meditation technique series in Conscious Control. And this one's about one of the most applicable meditation techniques to real life. It's one that I call the zone in technique. It's my favorite technique. It's the one that I use the most often day to day. And honestly, once you master it, it starts to feel a little bit more like a superpower than anything else. The basic idea of the technique is that you choose one point of focus in front of you, one spot to hone in on. And then you intensely zone in with 100% of your attention to that exact spot. It's meant to be used essentially as a manual override to shift the landscape of your brain, no matter what your brain is currently doing, no matter what your network balance currently is. You're completely overriding that and intensely focusing on one single point in front of you. You're zoning in to that moment. You're locking in. You're getting real present, real focused on one specific point. Doing this stops all of the other processes in the brain, and every resource available tunes into that one single point, tunes into the present moment. And because you're giving 100% of your attention, there's simply nothing left over to pay attention to anything else in your brain. And so it stops all of the other processes by intensely focusing on this one. It's like the idea of power versus strength versus endurance, right? Power implies maximum output with speed and explosiveness. Endurance is over the long term with less intensity, more stability based. And then strength falls somewhere in the middle. You need some power to have strength, but you also need some endurance to have strength. Strength is less of an explosive output. It's more of a power over time. You can think of these as the difference between a vertical jump and a plank. A plank is more endurance. You're holding it over the long term. A vertical jump is more all of your output in that one moment. When zoning in, you want to explosively redirect your attention to something very specific. In meditation, obviously, I choose my breath, or I like to combine it with the spotlight technique, which was actually the first part of this series, which I explained in my last video, and zone in intensely to each new spot whenever I move the spotlight. But in real life, it can be anything, right? Meditation is just the exercise. Conscious control is the practice, but real life is the game. Real life is when you're using it on purpose. So in real life, it can be anything. It can be music. It can be the person you're talking to. It can simply be putting one foot in front of the other while you're walking. You can zone in to anything. In fact, it really helps if it's visually cued as opposed to other senses, because your eyes are a very big part of your brain, and your eyes do reflect the mental stability of your brain. So if you zone into one moment visually, if you zone into a visual cue of a single point that you're looking at in front of you, whether it's, again, your feet walking one foot in front of the other, or if you're doing something with your hands, zoning into your hands, just literally paying attention to what you're doing, but intensely, all in one moment, all of a sudden. When zoning in like this, you're aligning your vision with your stream of focus, and you're putting them over one another so that they're aligned and in the same spot. You can think of it as when you're focusing a camera lens in a movie scene, where suddenly the focus just cues into one specific spot. You're doing the same thing with your eyes and with your mind, with your stream of focus. Now, when you think about zoning in terms of the brain, in terms of the brain's networks, it can best be thought of as the opposite of zoning out, right? What is zoning out? It's daydreaming. It's being in your head, not paying attention. But when you zone out, you're slipping into that state. Zoning out is when you were focused on the task at hand, when your control network was active and your salience network was active, and you were allocating your attention to the present moment, but slowly your internal network took that attention away. It started sliding towards being in your head. You started sliding towards zoning out. Oftentimes it slips away and you don't even realize that it's happening. It's not an intentional thing. So zoning in is really the opposite. It is intentional. And instead of slowly slipping out of attention, you're forcefully putting your attention back. Again, it's literally a manual override. And when you practice it enough, you'll find that you're able to zone in more intensely, with more accuracy, and you're able to sustain that focus after you zone in longer. When you first start doing it, you'll probably zone into a moment and then lose that intensity almost immediately. But once you practice it over and over and over again, you start to be able to zone into a moment and stay there. And that's the goal, really. But at the same time, again, it's meant to be like a manual override. So if you are feeling lazy, if you have been on your phone for 20 minutes and you know that you need to get off of it and do whatever you need to do, but it's a little bit difficult to get that push. Or if you're laying in bed and you know that you should get up, but it's a little difficult to get that push, or you're in a depressive episode and you can't really find that motivation, right? There's so many people who say you shouldn't rely on motivation, you should rely on discipline, because motivation will not always be there and discipline guides you through the times when you're not motivated. Well, this can also guide you through the times when you're not motivated. You may not win that battle within your own mind. You may not win that argument with yourself of whether or not you should get up or whether or not you should start doing what you need to do. Sometimes you have to stop the argument altogether and just manual override, just push through and just all in one sudden moment, take the leap and just go. If you have a familiar state of mind, your mind is very habitual. So if you can have a familiar state of mind, which is the state of ultimate presence, the moment after you zone in, then whenever your mind wanders off course, whenever you are in those depressive episodes, whenever you are struggling to find the motivation, whatever the case may be, again, moving to a familiar place of mind is so much easier after it becomes more familiar, after your brain has the habit of that established mind state. So if you zone in enough, that becomes a familiar spot for your mind. Your mind settles into that spot of ultimate presence. And every time you try to go there from then on, becomes easier because you're going to a familiar spot as opposed to just coming out of a familiar spot. If you get depressed often, if you often lack motivation, that is the current familiar spot for your mind. You want to change that. You want to shift or at least give your mind another familiar spot to go to. No matter what A is, no matter what your mind currently was doing, you know that B is solid. You know that this spot that your mind is going to, this moment of ultimate presence, this zoning in technique is familiar. It's something that you've practiced and it's borderline habitual. And that's what zoning in helps you do, because again, if you're not winning that argument within your head, stop the argument completely and just zone into the present moment, forcefully, intensely, and intentionally. And you can practice it in so many different ways. You can practice it during meditation. Zoning in, it can be one of the techniques that you use, or you can simply practice it in real life. I think that zoning in while driving is a really good, easy thing to do. Anytime you're zoned out while driving, or anytime you notice that you get zoned out, all of a sudden, as soon as you're aware of it, zone in intensely, as powerfully as you can. Zone into staying exactly in the middle of the lines on the road. Zone into 10 into your hands on the wheel. Zone into the song that's being played right then and there. Just zone in and focus on, again, getting the most power out of it that you can, making it the most explosive, directional change of attention that you can. And over time, your ability to do that will get better, more accurate, and more precise.